Alley-oop. Hey there everyone, Aravan here again to bring you a breakdown for the recently released GP-31 grenade pistol in Helldivers 2. Democratic Detonation has definitely shaken up the loadouts for many players with its release, none so more than the utility brought to us by the grenade pistol. But how good is it? Let's talk about its technical specifications, damage breakpoints, and target effectiveness to find out. As always, the thoughts and opinions on these weapons are derived entirely from Difficulty 9 Helldive, giving you the most accurate information on how these weapons perform against the game's highest difficulty. The grenade pistol, of course, is shockingly an explosives weapon, as you would expect, sharing many similarities to other real-world 40mm break-action grenade launchers such as the M79, or the general slang term I've always thought was funny for some reason, 40 Mike. The weapon fires shells packed with a high explosive payload, rigged for a relatively high velocity for a launcher, with a minimum arming distance of 6 meters before detonating. There's otherwise no maximum range for this weapon. As this is a grenade launcher, the bullet drop of this weapon is quite significant, falling by about half a meter after 10 meters of travel, a meter and a half after 20 meters of travel, and approximately 5 meters by the time it's traveled 40 meters. Dropping dramatically more past this point, so aiming high is always a necessity with this thing. As far as the specifics of aiming with the red dot of this weapon, that is more or less useless, as the previously covered CB9 explosive crossbow's reticle was, sporting no mil dots, of course, to assist you with compensating for the drop. I've instead done the legwork to give you some mental mil dots to keep in mind. At no point past the minimum arming distance will this red dot be accurate. At 10 meters, you want to be aiming right above the dot. At 20 meters, you'll need to line up the target with the bottom of your sight around here, and anything past this is going to require you to eyeball and compensate for the drop, likely using third person, as the sight will assist you no further than this. The explosive radius is like the other weapons in this warbond, a maximum of 8 meters from the impact site, which, at its outer radius, will result in minimal damage, roughly 10% or so. However, unlike the other weapons in this warbond, the damage fall-off from the epicenter is extremely significant, where the crossbow will deal its full damage within 6 meters of where the projectile lands. The grenade pistol instead experiences an extreme drop-off in damage the further the target is from where it lands, only dealing its full damage within about 2 meters of the target, meaning compared to the other explosive weaponry such as the eruptor, the crossbow, or impact grenades, enemies will only take significant damage from this weapon if extremely close to where your shell lands. Due to the minimum arming distance and this extreme damage fall-off from the center, however, you are far less likely to democratically detonate yourself with this weapon compared to the rest, making the fortified armor passive and personal shield generator, regularly mentioned during my breakdowns for this warbond, less necessary to have a comfortable experience. As far as the damage this weapon deals with its explosion, its whopping 600 damage on the tooltip is accurate. However, it is a bit misleading. Only 250 of this damage is the explosive radius itself, while the other 350 is the projectile, the shell's impact. So due to the explosive damage fall-off and the damage cut between the shell and the explosion, don't expect a huge amount of AoE kills comparatively to other explosives with this sidearm. On the bright side though, the most useful utility of this sidearm by far, and the reason many will run it alone, is the grenade pistol is capable of both closing fabricator vents and bug holes, meaning you can comfortably run utility grenades like smokes or stuns without losing your personal capability to destroy spawners without the use of stratagems. This is a massive utility not currently found on any other sidearm in the game at the moment. Huge W here. As this is a sidearm and therefore one-handed, we can run a ballistic shield alongside this weapon if we wish, allowing us to very easily tank large amounts of gunfire, while firing off some AoE damage in return. This playstyle is of course vulnerable to rockets, but aren't we all really? Not for everyone, of course, but worth mentioning this is quite fun with this buff to the ballistic shield, now covering much more of your body on average during use than before. Sound profile-wise, launching of the grenade itself is very quiet, garnering next to no reaction from enemies beyond 10 meters from you. The explosion itself also garners less attention, seemingly, than the exploding crossbow, only drawing enemies to investigate the explosion from about 30 meters around in all directions, meaning it can be used during stealth gameplay for the purpose of luring patrols and guards off their path, allowing you to sneak by them. Couple this with its ability to close enemy spawners, and you've got yourself a fantastic utility sidearm. This way, speed is also quite responsive, as is fitting for such a small weapon, so that's a nice touch. Always nice whenever our weapon is responsive, after all. Looking at you, Diligence CS. Stagger-wise, this launcher packs some punch, having a heavy stagger effect on any enemy it impacts directly, but to a lesser degree for those only caught in the blast. Overall, any stagger is good stagger, especially coming from your sidearm of all things. Now for the bad news. You are only granted a grand total of 10 shells on deployment. I say 10 because your first load has 2 shells in it due to the universal one in the chamber rule that the game kinda implies here, but it makes no sense, but whatever. Normally you'll have 9 shells in total, and as the weapon is a break action single shell launcher, that's not a lot of shots to go around. To make matters worse, you only receive 1 shell back from field crates and a measly 2 shells back from resupply crates. This is a positively crippled ammo economy, among the worst in the entire game by far. So when you fire this thing, you better be doing so with purpose, and you better be making those shots count, as there is not enough firepower to get you very far without constant resupplies. The reloading speed is pretty snappy, so at least when we need another shell loaded in, we don't have to wait on it too terribly long. And as our fire rate is entirely determined by how fast we can shove another shell in the chamber, the fire rate, as you can imagine, is not very good. Roughly able to launch a shell every 1.75 seconds. Recommend firing this potentially as an opener in an engagement while the enemy is close together to get some initial AoE damage, or just for utility purposes mostly, as it's not often going to be your most efficient combative action. To end our technical specs, let's talk about the penetration value of the weapon. The same as every other weapon in this warbond, this sidearm sports medium penetration for its projectile, class 3. Similar to the Eruptor, the explosion itself is also medium penetration as well, so also class 3 explosive damage, meaning this weapon, while its ammo is limited, is extremely effective against the majority of the targets in the game as a result. While the projectile may not penetrate through the majority of heavy armor, the explosive radius is often large enough to damage enemy weak points from odd angles, similar in fashion to the Scorcher and the Eruptor. This is always nice to have, especially for those cannon turrets and tanks. So now that we have a full understanding of the weapon we are working with today, let's talk about its all-important damage breakpoints and target effectiveness versus the enemies of freedom, starting with the Automatons. Light bots, as expected, when taking 600 damage, or even the 250 explosive damage the thing dishes out, will go down with ease if caught within the blast radius. While this is funny, I do not recommend using it for this purpose, there are far too many of these to be spending any of our very few shells on. Striders are taken out pretty easily as well, with the rider dying from the explosion when caught anywhere near it. It's not difficult to collateral a few of these with 1 shell, thankfully. However, again, our ammo is very limited, so I only recommend using it for this purpose if your primary does not deal with this enemy well. Heavy and Rocket Devastators unfortunately have the health pool to tank a direct hit to both their torso or legs, meaning it's going to take us at least 2 shots to either of these, or a pretty difficult headshot to kill them with this weapon. This is obviously not a sustainable way to use this weapon, as we don't have the ammo for this kind of thing, so recommend only using it against Devastators as an opener on their groups for some splash damage, or not at all. Berserkers unfortunately take 2 shots from the grenade pistol unless you can land a headshot, making this a very poor use of our limited ammo. Avoid using this weapon for this purpose, or only use it sparingly when dealing AoE damage to the group. Gunships, yeah, no. For obvious reasons, don't try it. Not worth it. Moving on. Tanks and cannon turrets are a pretty good target here, being damaged anytime you land a shot anywhere around the back half via the explosion to their heat sinks, as well as being taken out in 3 direct hits to the sink from just this weapon alone. Not fantastic for bringing these down all on its own, but useful if you intend to burst them down before they can react by firing a shell into a quick swap to your primary to finish these off. Hulks don't take any damage from this pistol here outside of their heat sinks, which will explode in 3 direct hits. Thankfully, each of these also stagger the Hulk, once again setting you up for a good burst of damage into a weapon swap combo. Factory Striders. Yes, I know, I've finally gotten to combat them, with the Automatons returning them to the front line, being seemingly done with their prototype phase. This is quite the fierce enemy, and while it is possible to damage its Fabricator Door weak spot on the bottom side with this weapon, if you get yourself into this position, I hope you have a better plan in mind than using a sidearm grenade pistol when you're probably not even outside the minimum arming distance at this angle, as it's certainly not the weapon for taking these on. That does it for the Automaton, so let's run through how this weapon performs against the Terminids, shall we? Warriors, hunters, and scavengers are all taken down with just one shell landing anywhere near them, although due to our high damage fall off towards the outer portion of our explosive radius, you will sometimes see warriors tanking an explosion due to their bulkier health pool. While this is fun, while you have the ammo to do it, not a good way to spend those few precious shells, I gotta say. Hive guards are capable of tanking a shell from this weapon unless hit directly in their little mouths at the bottom of the plate, as anywhere on the upper plate reduces the explosive damage seemingly due to its sloped nature. Their bodies, however, cannot sustain such damage and give way should a single shell impact them. Brood commanders are a notoriously durable enemy when it comes to the explosive category of weapons, most likely due to their armor on their heads being considered sloped, I would imagine, causing them to often soak 2 to 3 of your shells to bring them down when impacting them anywhere. This is basically a terrible use of our ammo as a result, so I do not recommend this. Bile spewers can be taken out should you land a hit to their lower head's weak point in just 1 shell, but more commonly will be turned to goo by 2 shells landing anywhere on their bodies. Not a great answer when this enemy is so numerous, but an answer nonetheless. And it can be a good way to deal some initial splash damage to these as well at the beginning of an engagement. For stalkers, the grenade pistol will not be your first choice for dispatching them, but just for fun, a shot to their mouths will kill them outright, while 2 shells will otherwise kill them anywhere else on the body. Remember, you would have a very limited window to do this, however, as they close the distance into your minimum arming distance extremely quickly. Shriekers, yeah, nope, they'll certainly die if you hit them, but this is definitely one of those moments where we should stop to ask ourselves not if we can, but if we should. Use another weapon for these, and class 4 or better penetration for their nests, as this pistol cannot damage those. Chargers, I had a very difficult time damaging anywhere but their rear with the grenade pistol, even while stunned, settling on the easiest method being to hit their rear with it a total of 4 times. Not ammo efficient or sustainable, but it can be done. Or you can use this weapon simply for some stagger and initial burst damage at least. Bile Titan sacks can be destroyed in 2 shells by this weapon, but can otherwise not be injured, so unless they are critically injured beforehand, don't expect to land any kill shots with this thing against the big boys. As you'd expect, this sidearm is not built to handle an enemy the size of a 3-story building, so swap to something that is. Alright, that about sums up our breakdown of the GP-31 grenade pistol. So, how good is it? Well, in my opinion, when you compare it to the other 3, more so arguably 2 sidearm options in the game, the grenade pistol is a top-tier choice for most loadouts, bringing unique utility in the form of spawner destruction, as well as a low sound profile with an explosion that is great for stealth gameplay sound lures, as well as some AoE burst damage when you need it. The majority of this weapon value is only lost when running an explosive primary weapon, where you'd probably rather have something you can use up close as your swap, but otherwise shines as a clutch swap when you just need a bit of AoE burst damage, or need a personal nest closer to round out a build you would prefer to run utility grenades on. As someone who never uses impacts or high explosives or incendiary grenades, instead favoring the utility of smokes or stun grenades, this sidearm has become a mainstay in many of my loadouts as a result, which will likely be the case for many others with similar tastes as well. Thank you for watching till the end, and have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time.
And now, another helpful tip from General Brash.
Eravin's tireless efforts to bring us the most up-to-date information on our new sidearm has proven invaluable to our cause. For this reason, I am ordering all active Helldivers to like, comment, and subscribe to his channel. Failure to complete this major order will result in your weapon sway being increased 50%.
Brash tactics. Use them or die trying.